I have 4 points I'd like to briefly raise. But before I do that, I want to also lend my voice to the points raised that refer to a line of possible economic sabotage where funds due to the NDDC are being withheld, agreed outstanding amounts are being ignored, and equally to refer to the point of fair hearing that was raised by another of our colleagues. Fair hearing where this particular company appears to be a serial offender. 2021 dragged to the EFCC, amounts agreed, and a small fraction paid. Meanwhile, the amount outstanding is growing every year, and they are operating in our oil fields clearly very profitably. My 4 points, sir. The first is that I noticed that from the NDDC Act, there is no penalty for non-compliance with the 3% of budget to be paid. And so I dug a bit deeper and looked for a similar item in the Petroleum Industry Act 2021. And under the incorporation of host communities development trusts, there's a sanction for non-compliance of the payment that should be equal to 3% of the actual annual operating expenditure of the preceding financial year. So I read from section 238, sanction for non-compliance. Failure by any holder of a license or lease governed by this chapter to comply with its obligation under this chapter after having been informed of such failure in writing by the Commission and continued failure to comply after the expiration of the period specified in the notice may be grounds for revocation of the applicable license or lease. And I think the company should be made aware that non-compliance with the NDDC Act will attract penalties. And I think that is a significant function that should come out of today's session. Even though they're not here, they should be aware that there will be penalties. You cannot break the law and expect to get away with it. The second point is that in his presentation, the MD made reference to others that have not paid. And a phrase that he used caught my attention, that the NDDC would negotiate with these operators. The law is very clear, 3% of the budget. There should be no negotiation. In fact, there should be penalties for late payment. The time value of money means that for every year they delay payment, the funds that would accrue to the NDDC are reducing in value. So there is a need for us to support from our end here at the National Assembly to ensure that penalties are put in place for late payment, as well as penalties for non-payment, so as to deter people from paying late, which is clearly what is happening now. There are no penalties, so people continue to delay their payment. The third point I'd like to look at, and distinguished Senator Shomole raised that also, but maybe for emphasis I will still repeat it. If they're not paying the NDDC obligation, I would strongly suspect they're not paying their taxes, the petroleum taxes, etc. And so maybe we should also look further at those aspects to see whether they are serial offenders across the board completely. Since we are talking of a period of maybe up to 15 years where they have failed to comply or significantly failed to comply with the payment of the 3% due to the NDDC. My last point, sir. Clearly, this is not the only case. Perhaps the committee should be given a list of all offenders, and let us look at them one by one in order to ensure that the NDDC is fully funded to carry out the responsibilities that have been entrusted to them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.